So now let's talk about using static files with the Bottle web app framework. So an important thing to understand with whatever web app framework you're using in the Python world is it doesn't work the same way as Apache or Nginx does if you're used to those at being a web developer, right? So basically when you use Apache or when you use Nginx, what happens is you have a folder structure. You have folders, parent folders and children folders and the whole nine yards. And in there you dump files. You dump HTML files and CSS files and PHP files and everything else. When somebody comes to your website, they come to index. Whatever, PHP, HTML, or something else. That is your home page, and then from there, basically files are able to be brought in for the pictures and to make everything look pretty and to be able to navigate in the whole nine yards. So basically, think about it as essentially you have a folder, and what Apache and Nginx does is it makes that folder available essentially to the wider world is the idea. The important thing to understand though is with these web app frameworks is that's basically not how they work, right? When you come to a route, a static or a dynamic route, basically it's going to dynamically write the page for the visitor and present that. Well, when it writes the page, all it's going to be doing is it's going to be writing text, right? There's no folder structure. It's simply writing the text and presenting it. And so an important thing to be thinking about when you're creating these web apps using something like Bottle or Django is that any piece of functionality is also a vulnerability, right? If you allow people to do something on your server, that also opens up the possibility that they might try to hack your server in some particular way. And so having a web server that also hosts files, or people can input files into, does open up some vulnerabilities. So an architectural idea with using these web app frameworks is that one server should basically be writing the web pages, and that the files, whether they're images or whether they're CSS or whatever else, should be stored on a different server so that the systems are compartmentalized. So if one thing gets compromised, everything doesn't get compromised, right? So the idea is this might be running on one instance of DigitalOcean, and all of your pictures and your CSS files may be over in a bucket on AWS. That's the basic idea. Of course, with us, we're sitting here, we're playing around, we're creating small projects, you're doing labs and that type of thing. So you don't necessarily want to go into this big old architecture just to be able to deliver, a style sheet to the end user. So what you can do is you can use the static file function, and using the static file function, this allows you to share folders on your computer that from those you will be able to deliver the static files for CSS and images and that type of deal. So now let's take a look at a script that uses the static file function. So basically we're going to have a web page here. It's going to have a CSS style sheet. We are also going to embed an image onto that web page, and this is how we're able to deliver the style sheet and the image from a folder on our machine. So we're going to say from Bottle import run, route, and static file. So we need that static file function. We're going to do the @route decorator, and we're going to go to root. So to find index, and then I'm going to create a page here. And basically all I'm doing is I'm just simply creating a simple page. I'm putting this in between the three quotation marks. So single, single, single here, and single, single, single here. This allows me to create a multi-line string here. And here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to link a style sheet. So link a style sheet, type text CSS, and the href, the link to it, is going to be static style.css. So go to static, and then in there find the style.css file for the CSS. We're then going to come here to body. So we're going to say h1 static file. Then we're going to embed an image. Image style equals height 300 pixels, width equals auto, src equals static, image.png, and then under this we're going to say this is an embedded picture, and we're going to close the body here, right? So we are putting a style sheet in this, and we are going to be embedding an image. Now if we go over, we take a look at our file structure. If you can take a look at this here, right? Basically, again, I'm just using the desktop as I've been using for a lot of these examples, and on the desktop I have a folder called static. So you need to create a folder called static wherever your working directory is. We've talked about that current working directory before. And so if you open a workspace, put static there. If you're just running this, let's say from the command line, this may go back. You may need to put the static folder directly into your user root directory. So user/Eli, put that there. So you're going to create a folder called static, and then all the static files will go in there. So we have image.png and we have style.css will be in this static folder, right? If we go and we take a look at it, we can see this is the style sheet. So simply H1, background color is red, and P, the color is blue. And then for the image, for the .png, we have my favorite picture of all times of a space marine fighting a space orc with a little cute bunny sitting there, right? So we're going to embed this image and we're going to be using that CSS. Then what we do is we come down and we create a route for static. Right, so notice here, right, the image, the src for the image is static, and the href for the style sheet is also static. So we have to create this folder for static within our bottle web app here. So we're going to say here, we're going to use the app route decorator. So /static. And then we've used those dynamic routes before, so we use the dynamic route for a name or an age. You can also use that for a file path. So file name : path. So what we're going to say is whatever is going to be coming in as this value is going to be a path. So /static /image.png. So static is the folder and image.png is going to be the file name path, right? We're going to create a function here. So define send static file name, so the file name that comes in. I'm going to print that out on the screen just to verify that it's actually working for me. And then we're going to return, so the static file function, we're going to do the file name, so the file name that came in with a root of ./static. So basically the ./ this is a relative value, so basically it's saying look for the static folder within the relative directory. So basically we're going to do period /static. And so that means here, again, if you're using this workspace, static should be in the same directory. You're creating everything. And then what will happen is when you run the script, it'll look at static for image and for the style sheet. It will come down here and then it will return whatever content is sitting there. So we do host equals localhost port 8080 like we normally do. I hit run. We do command localhost. And there we go, all right, static file, that's in red, that's my CSS style sheet. We have our picture of our Space Marines, our orc, and our little bunny, and then this is an embedded picture, and we have that in blue. So that is how we are able to use static files from our own system and be able to deliver those to the visitors to our web app. So one of the things to keep in mind is when you create the static folder and when you put the files into the static folder, your visitors are going to need permission to be able to view whatever's in the static folder, right? This is basic, file permissions, and so that's something that you do have to be concerned about. So I'm here at the desktop. So again, my desktop is my current working directory. Yours might be different. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do ls --l to do a list of the files that are on my desktop. We can see the example.py script. So there's a script that we're normally running, and then we can see the static folder. If we go over here, we can see it's a directory. So the owner, I, have read, write, execute permission on this directory. The group owner, staff, has read and execute permission on this directory, and everybody else, so this is basic Linux permissions here, read and X has read and execute permission on this directory. So basically anybody should be able to read this directory. I then go cd static, then ls/l, so basically I've come into the static directory here, and then I take a look at the files that are here. Again, the image.png and the style.css. So read write permission for owner for Eli, read permission for group owner staff, and read permission for everybody else, right? For style, read write, read read. So basically what this is telling me is that the permissions on this server, on this system, should allow visitors to be able to view the image that I'm showing you. So this could be a problem, especially in, let's say, a development environment where you have permission to view or do things to files, but other people don't. So when you run it on your machine, everything looks pretty. When you go to deploy it and you have visitors coming in from external, they're not able to see anything. And the reason is because these files, the permissions may not be quite correct. If you need to understand more about that, this goes into Linux permissions, something we'll have classes on at some point, and I've taught quite a bit at this point. You might have to go into like ChatGPT or whatever just to ask a question if you are having an issue. But if you are having a weird issue where it seems like your code is working fine, but for some reason the files are not being delivered, it's most likely going to be this permissions issue. So that's the basic idea of being able to deliver static files from your system or from your server, right? You're going to create a route to the static folder with the file name, right? So whatever file name they're looking for. You're going to create the function with bringing in the file name that the person is looking for, and then you do return static file, the file name that came in, and then you give it the root. So period slash static for a relative path to the static folder. This static folder, again, should be in your current working directory, and the users or the visitors to your site should have permission to read both the folder and be able to read the files inside the folder. As long as that's the case, then again, when you're basically sending out the image or the CSS file or whatever other file, it should be able to work properly for you. So that's the idea behind static files.